The moment the cameras cut to commercial, chaos erupted in the studio. Producers scrambled to regroup, shouting instructions into their headsets while interns rushed around trying to locate Trevor. The stage manager frantically waved at Karoline, signaling for her to stay seated in case they needed to go back live unexpectedly. But Karoline didn't seem fazed by the commotion. She sat calmly, her hands folded neatly on the desk, as though nothing unusual had happened. Behind the scenes, Trevor paced furiously in his dressing room. His face was flushed and beads of sweat formed on his forehead despite the air conditioning humming steadily. He couldn't believe what had just transpired. How could this have happened? Who had leaked those documents? And why now, of all times? His mind raced with questions, but answers eluded him. All he knew was that his carefully constructed world was crumbling before his eyes. "Trevor," a voice called out sharply. It was Linda, his PR consultant, barging into the room without knocking. Her heels clicked against the tiled floor as she approached him. "What the hell was that? You can't just walk off during a live broadcast." "Didn't have a choice," Trevor snapped, running a hand through his hair. "She ambushed me with fabricated evidence. I couldn't sit there and let her destroy my reputation." Linda crossed her arms, her expression stern. "Whether it's true or not doesn't matter right now. What matters is how the public perceives it. Do you realize how bad this looks? People are already calling you guilty because you ran away." Before Trevor could respond, Richard, his lawyer, entered the room. Unlike Linda, Richard exuded calmness, even in moments of crisis. He carried a leather briefcase and wore a dark suit that made him look more like a character from a courtroom drama than a legal advisor. Setting the briefcase down on the couch, he turned to Trevor. "We need to handle this carefully. First things first, what exactly did she accuse you of?" Trevor hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, he sighed and slumped onto the couch. "She claims I've been funneling money into offshore accounts and working with some secretive tech project. There were emails and bank statements. I don't know where she got them, but they looked real." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Did you review the documents yourself?" "No," Trevor admitted reluctantly. "But I recognize some of the details. If they're fake, they're very convincing." "That complicates things," Richard said, pulling out a notebook. "If these allegations gain traction, we'll need to prepare a strong defense. For now, avoid making any public statements until we assess the situation fully." Linda nodded in agreement. "And whatever you do, don't admit to anything, not even indirectly. Any slip-up will be used against you." Trevor buried his face in his hands, feeling the weight of the situation crush him. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had always prided himself on being untouchable, someone who could navigate any controversy with ease. Yet here he was, hiding in his dressing room like a fugitive, his career hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, back on set, Karoline remained composed despite the whirlwind of activity around her. A producer approached her cautiously, asking if she wanted to take a break or grab some water. She declined politely, keeping her focus sharp. She knew the next segment would be critical, her chance to explain everything to the audience and ensure they understood the gravity of the situation. When the show returned from commercial, Karoline was alone on camera. The absence of Trevor only added to the tension. Viewers leaned closer to their screens, eager to hear what she would say next. With a steady voice, she addressed the audience directly. "As many of you witnessed moments ago, Trevor Noah chose to leave the set rather than address serious allegations regarding his conduct. While I understand this may come as a shock, it's important to emphasize that these accusations are not baseless. The documents I presented tonight are authentic and verified by multiple independent sources." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "These records reveal a pattern of behavior involving undisclosed financial transactions and ties to a highly classified initiative known as Project Genesis. Without going into too much detail yet, I can tell you that this project raises significant ethical concerns that deserve our attention." The studio fell silent once again. Even the crew, who were accustomed to handling breaking news, seemed captivated by Karoline's delivery. Her tone was measured, her words deliberate. She wasn't sensationalizing the story, she was presenting facts, leaving viewers to draw their own conclusions. As the segment continued, Karoline delved deeper into the specifics of the allegations. She explained how Trevor's offshore accounts had been flagged during routine audits, but never investigated thoroughly due to lack of resources. She also hinted at connections between Trevor and influential figures involved in cutting-edge artificial intelligence research, a revelation that sent shockwaves through social media. The time the show ended, hashtags related to the scandal were trending worldwide. Memes mocking Trevor's abrupt exit flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Some users praised Karoline for her bravery, while others speculated about ulterior motives behind her investigation. Despite the mixed reactions, one thing was clear: Trevor's life would never be the same. Later that evening, Karoline left the studio accompanied by Alex, a fellow journalist who had been quietly supporting her throughout the process. Alex was younger than Karoline, with curly brown hair and a laid-back demeanor that contrasted sharply with her intense professionalism. As they walked to their cars, Alex broke the silence. "You handled that like a pro," he said, giving her a thumbs up. "Seriously, I've seen veteran reporters crack under less pressure. How are you holding up?" Karoline shrugged, unlocking her car door. "I'm fine. To be honest, I expected worse. Trevor walking off actually worked in my favor. It validated the seriousness of the allegations." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Still, this isn't over. Once the dust settles, people will start digging deeper. Are you ready for that?" "I have to be," Karoline replied firmly. "This isn't just about Trevor anymore. It's about exposing the truth and holding powerful people accountable. If I back down now, everything we've uncovered will be for nothing." Her determination was unwavering, but Alex couldn't help noticing the slight tremor in her voice. He knew better than anyone how dangerous investigative journalism could be, especially when it involved high-profile individuals. Still, he admired her resolve and promised to stand by her side no matter what. Back at his apartment, Trevor sat alone in the dark, staring blankly at his phone. Notifications poured in endlessly: texts, emails, direct messages, all demanding explanations or offering condolences. Most of them went unanswered. He felt trapped, suffocating under the weight of scrutiny. For the first time in years, he wondered if he had pushed his luck too far. Just as he considered turning off his phone, altogether a new message appeared. It was from an unknown number containing only 3 words: Project Genesis compromised. The next morning, the city buzzed with talk of Trevor's dramatic exit and Karoline's explosive revelations. News outlets replayed clips of the interview endlessly, dissecting every word and gesture. Social media feeds were flooded with memes, opinions, and wild theories about what had really happened. Some called Trevor a fraud. Others accused Karoline of orchestrating a witch hunt. Amid the chaos, one thing was certain: the story wasn't going away anytime soon. For Trevor, the day began in a haze of anxiety and paranoia. He hadn't slept a wink after receiving that cryptic message: Project Genesis compromised. The words echoed in his mind, leaving him restless and uneasy. Who had sent it? What did it mean? And how much did they know? These questions plagued him as he stared out the window of his high-rise apartment, watching the city come alive below. His phone buzzed again, snapping him back to reality. It was Linda, his PR consultant, calling to check in. Reluctantly, he answered. "What now?" he muttered, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We need to act fast," Linda said without preamble. "The longer you stay silent, the worse it gets. People are starting to believe Karoline's claims." "I'm not ready to face the cameras yet," Trevor snapped, pacing across the room. "Not until I figure out who's behind this." "That's exactly why we need to move quickly," Linda insisted. "If you wait too long, you'll lose control of the narrative entirely. Let me schedule an exclusive interview with a sympathetic outlet. We can spin this as a misunderstanding or even frame Karoline as someone with a personal vendetta." Trevor hesitated. The idea of going public terrified him, but Linda had a point. Staying hidden would only fuel speculation. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, set it up. But make sure the interviewer doesn't ambush me like she did." "Don't worry," Linda assured him. "I'll handle everything." While Trevor plotted his comeback, Karoline was already several steps ahead. She arrived at the office early, her mind focused on unraveling the mystery of Project Genesis. Sitting at her desk, she sifted through the documents she'd received. From the whistleblower searching for clues that might shed light on its true purpose, Alex joined her shortly afterward, bringing coffee and a fresh perspective. "So, what's the plan?" Alex asked, setting the cups down. "You've exposed Trevor's shady dealings, but Project Genesis still feels like a black box. How do we crack it open?" Karoline leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the edge of her notebook. "We start by tracing the money. Trevor's offshore accounts are linked to shell companies, which are likely fronts for funding this project. If we can identify who's pulling the strings, we might get closer to understanding what they're building." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense, but where do we begin? Shell companies are designed to be untraceable." "Not completely," Karoline replied. "Every transaction leaves a trail. It just takes time and the right connections to follow it." She opened her laptop and pulled up a secure messaging app. After a few moments of typing, she sent a request to Rachel, a former employee turned whistleblower who had worked on similar projects in the past. Rachel had been hesitant to share information initially, fearing retaliation. But Karoline hoped the recent developments would convince her to cooperate. Within minutes, Rachel responded. Her message was brief but promising. "Meet me tomorrow, San Francisco. Bring proof." Karoline smiled faintly. This was the break she needed. Turning to Alex, she said, "Pack your bags, we're going to San Francisco." The following afternoon, Karoline and Alex landed in San Francisco, a city known for its tech innovation and secrecy. They met Rachel at a quiet cafe tucked away, in the Mission District. Rachel was younger than Karoline had expected, with sharp features and an air of nervous energy. She glanced around cautiously before sliding into the booth across from them. "You didn't tell anyone about this meeting, right?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one," Karoline assured her. "We're here to listen." Rachel took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself. "Okay, here's what I know. Project Genesis isn't just some random experiment. It's a government-backed initiative aimed at developing advanced AI capable of predicting human behavior. Think surveillance on steroids. They've been testing it in major cities for years, collecting data without consent." Karoline exchanged a glance with Alex, both of them processing the gravity of Rachel's words. "And Trevor's role in all this?" she asked. "He funneled money into the project under the guise of philanthropy," Rachel explained. "But once the technology proved profitable, he started using it for personal gain. Everything from manipulating stock prices to influencing political campaigns. He wasn't alone, though. There's a whole network of people involved." Karoline scribbled notes furiously, her mind racing with possibilities. This was bigger than she'd imagined, a scandal that reached far beyond Trevor's misdeeds. "Do you have any evidence?" she asked. "Documents, emails, anything concrete?" Rachel hesitated, glancing over her shoulder again. "I can't give you anything directly. It's too risky. But I can point you in the right direction. Start looking into a company called Nexus Technologies. They're the ones running the project." With that, Rachel stood abruptly and hurried out of the cafe, leaving Karoline and Alex staring at each other in stunned silence. Back in Chicago, Trevor sat nervously in front of a camera, preparing for his first post-scandal interview. The Baisu host, a friendly anchor named Greg, greeted him warmly, assuring him that the conversation would remain respectful. As the red light blinked on, Trevor forced a smile, determined to regain control of his image. "Thanks for having me, Greg," he began, his tone calm but defensive. "I want to address the allegations head-on because, frankly, they're ridiculous. Yes, I've made investments in various ventures over the years, but none of them involve illegal activity. These accusations are baseless, and I won't dignify them with further comment." Greg nodded sympathetically. "Understood, but let's talk about Project Genesis. What is it, and why has your name been connected to it?" Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Project Genesis is a research initiative focused on advancing AI technology. My involvement was purely financial. I believed in its potential to improve lives. Unfortunately, certain individuals have twisted the truth to serve their own agendas. Before Greg could respond, The screen behind them lit up with breaking news. A graphic flashed across the monitor. Exclusive report. Leaked documents reveal Trevor Noah's role in controversial AI program. Trevor's face went pale as Karoline appeared on screen, delivering a statement outside Nexus Technologies' headquarters. Our investigation has uncovered undeniable links between Trevor Noah and Nexus Technologies, she said, holding up a folder labeled Classified. These documents confirm that Project Genesis is being used to manipulate public opinion on a massive scale. The implications are staggering and the public deserves answers. The studio erupted into chaos. Cameras cut back to Trevor, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. For the second time in 2 days, he found himself unable to defend his actions. Muttering something inaudible, he stormed off the set once again, leaving Greg to awkwardly wrap up the segment. As the interview ended, social media exploded with reactions. Viewers debated whether Trevor was guilty or simply misunderstood, while others praised Karoline for her relentless pursuit of the truth. One thing was clear. Trevor's attempts to salvage his reputation had failed spectacularly. Meanwhile, Karoline returned to her hotel room, exhausted but exhilarated. She knew the fight was far from over, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about protecting society from the dangers of unchecked technological power, and she was ready to see it through no matter the cost. The days following Trevor's second disastrous interview felt like a storm that refused to pass. The public was divided, with some calling him a liar and others accusing Karoline of overstepping her bounds. Social media buzzed nonstop, dissecting every detail of the scandal. Memes mocking Trevor's repeated exits from live broadcasts flooded platforms, while hashtags like Project Genesis and Karoline Exposed the Truth dominated trending lists. For Trevor, the pressure was unbearable. His once flawless image had cracked wide open, and he found himself trapped in a nightmare with no clear way out. Back in Chicago, Trevor spent most of his time holed up in his apartment, glued to his phone as he scrolled through endless notifications. Messages poured in from friends, colleagues, and strangers alike, some offering support, others hurling insults. He deleted the worst ones without reading them fully, but their venom lingered in his mind. Worst of all were the anonymous threats, cryptic messages warning him to stay quiet or face consequences. Each one sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through him. Linda called him daily, urging him to take control of the narrative before it spiraled further out of hand. "You can't keep hiding," she told him during one particularly tense conversation. "Every day you stay silent, Karoline gains ground. People are starting to believe her version of events." "I know," Trevor snapped, pacing the length of his living room. "But what am I supposed to say? Every time I try to defend myself, she drops another bombshell. I'm not ready for round 3. "You don't have a choice," Linda said, firmly. "If you don't fight back, you'll lose everything. Your career, your reputation, it's all on the line." Trevor sighed heavily, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Fine. What do you suggest?" "Write an op-ed?" Linda replied without hesitation. "Something heartfelt where you admit to past mistakes but deny any wrongdoing related to Project Genesis. Focus on your contributions to journalism and appeal to people's emotions. It won't fix everything, but it might buy us some time." Against his better judgment, Trevor agreed. He spent hours drafting the piece, carefully choosing words that sounded sincere without admitting guilt. When it was published the next morning, the response was mixed. Some readers appreciated his candor, praising him for owning up to errors in judgment. Others dismissed the article as damage control, accusing him of manipulating the truth yet again. The backlash only fueled Karoline's resolve to dig deeper. Meanwhile, Karoline and Alex continued their investigation into Project Genesis. Armed with Rachel's tip about Nexus Technologies, they delved into the company's history, uncovering a web of connections that stretched far beyond Trevor. Their research revealed that Nexus wasn't just developing AI, it was creating tools capable of influencing human behavior on a massive scale. Algorithms designed to analyze social media trends were being used to predict and manipulate public opinion. Political campaigns, corporate marketing strategies, even viral movements online, all seemed to be guided by the same invisible hand. Karoline couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with something far bigger than a single scandal. This wasn't just about Trevor's greed or ambition. It was about the ethical implications of technology that could shape society without its knowledge or consent. Determined to expose the full scope of the project, she reached out to additional sources, including former Nexus employees and cybersecurity experts who specialized in tracking digital footprints. One such expert was Daniel, a soft-spoken programmer who had worked briefly on Project Genesis before resigning due to ethical concerns. He agreed to meet Karoline at a small cafe near his home, bringing with him a flash drive containing encrypted files. "I didn't want to get involved," he admitted nervously, sliding the drive across the table. "But when I saw your reports, I realized someone needed to speak up." "What's on here?" Karoline asked, holding the drive carefully. "Everything," Daniel replied. "Internal memos, test results, even recordings of meetings where they discussed expanding the program. It's all there." Karoline's heart raced as she slipped the drive into her bag. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means." Daniel nodded grimly. "Just be careful. These people don't mess around. If they find out you're onto them..." "We'll handle it," Alex interjected, his tone reassuring despite the tension in the air. "No one's getting hurt on our watch." As Karoline and Alex reviewed the contents of the flash drive, they uncovered shocking details about Project Genesis. The program wasn't just experimental, it was operational, already integrated into major platforms used by millions worldwide. From recommendation algorithms on streaming services to targeted ads on social media, Nexus's tools were subtly shaping decisions, preferences, and beliefs without users realizing it. Worse still, there were indications that the technology had been weaponized, deployed to sway elections and suppress dissent in countries across the globe. Determined to bring these findings to light, Karoline prepared to publish a comprehensive exposé. She knew the risks. Nexus Technologies had deep pockets and powerful allies, but she also knew the stakes. If the public didn't learn the truth, the misuse of AI would continue unchecked, eroding trust and freedom bit by bit. Her article went live late one evening, accompanied by a video summarizing key points for viewers. Within minutes, the internet exploded. News outlets picked up the story. Lawmakers demanded investigations and activists called for immediate action. Even skeptics who had doubted Karoline's motives began to question whether they'd underestimated the threat posed by unchecked technological advancements. For Trevor, the exposé marked a turning point he couldn't recover from. Despite his attempts to distance himself from Nexus and Project Genesis, new evidence kept surfacing, tying him more closely to the scandal. Anonymous leaks revealed emails showing his involvement in strategy meetings, financial records proving his investments in Nexus, and even transcripts of conversations where he discussed leveraging the program for personal gain. With each revelation, his credibility crumbled further. Desperate to salvage what little remained of his reputation, Trevor gave one final televised interview. This time, however, he avoided deflecting questions or making excuses. Instead, he admitted to poor judgment and expressed regret for failing to recognize the dangers of Project Genesis sooner. "I made mistakes," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I never intended to harm anyone. I hope in time people will understand that." The confession did little to sway public opinion. By then, the focus had shifted away from Trevor entirely, centering instead on the broader implications of Karoline's findings. Calls for stricter regulations on AI development echoed across political arenas, sparking debates about privacy, ethics, and accountability. In the weeks that followed, Trevor faded from the spotlight, retreating to a quiet life under an assumed identity. Meanwhile, Karoline emerged as a champion of transparency and truth-telling. Her courage inspired a new generation of journalists committed to holding power accountable, ensuring that stories like hers would continue to be told, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The sun was setting over the skyline of Chicago, casting long shadows across the bustling streets below. Inside WGN Studios, the energy was electric. The large glass windows of the newsroom reflected the golden light of dusk, and the hum of conversation filled the air. Reporters typed furiously on their keyboards, producers barked orders into headsets, and interns scurried around with cups of coffee in hand. It was just another evening at the station, or so it seemed. Trevor sat at his desk scrolling through the notes for tonight's broadcast. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit crisp and tailored. He had a reputation for being quick-witted and unflappable, qualities that made him one of the most popular anchors in the city. Tonight's show was supposed to be routine, an interview with Karoline Leavitt, a new face at the station who had recently joined as an investigative journalist. Trevor didn't think much of her beyond her impressive resume. She was smart, ambitious, and had already uncovered a few scandals since arriving, but she was just another guest, or so he believed. Karoline stood near the makeup counter adjusting her blazer in the mirror. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her green eyes scanned the room with quiet intensity. She wasn't nervous, far from it. In fact, she felt a strange calm wash over her as she reviewed the documents tucked safely inside her bag. For weeks, she had been chasing leads about Trevor's past. Rumors had swirled online about undisclosed financial dealings and ties to secretive organizations, but no one had been able to prove anything. Until now, an anonymous tip had landed in her inbox late last night. Attached were emails, bank statements, and even photographs, all pointing to Trevor's involvement in something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. At first, she thought it might be a hoax, but after verifying the information with multiple sources, she knew she had stumbled onto something explosive. And tonight, she planned to bring it all to light. As the clock ticked closer to airtime, Trevor glanced over at Karoline. She caught his eye and gave him a polite smile, but there was something unsettling about the way she looked at him. Her expression was calm, almost serene, but her eyes betrayed a hint of determination. Trevor pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to nerves. After all, this was her first major appearance on live television. Who wouldn't be a little anxious? 5 minutes to air, called out the stage manager, snapping Trevor out of his thoughts. He straightened his tie and took a deep breath. This was his element. The spotlight, the cameras, the thrill of connecting with millions of viewers. Nothing could shake him here, or so he thought. Karoline walked over to the set, taking her seat across from Trevor. The two exchanged pleasantries as the crew adjusted microphones and checked lighting. Trevor joked about how cold the studio always felt, and Karoline laughed politely, though her mind was elsewhere. She gripped the armrests of her chair tightly, rehearsing the questions she planned to ask. Each word had been carefully chosen, each follow-up designed to corner Trevor if he tried to dodge the truth. 30 seconds, announced the stage manager. The red light above the camera blinked on, signaling that they were live. Trevor flashed, his trademark grin at the lens, welcoming the audience with his usual charm. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to tonight's special episode. We're joined by our very own Karoline Leavitt, who has quickly become known for her groundbreaking investigations. Karoline, welcome to the show. Thank you, Trevor, Karoline replied, her voice steady. I'm excited to be here. She paused briefly, allowing herself a moment to collect her thoughts. Then, without missing a beat, she dove into the first question. Let's start with something simple. You've been in the public eye for years, building a reputation as a trusted voice in journalism. What do you think makes someone trustworthy? Trevor chuckled, clearly expecting an easy opener. Well, Karoline, I'd say honesty is key. People want to know that the person they're listening to is genuine, that they have integrity. Trust isn't given, it's earned. Karoline nodded, pretending to agree. Interesting perspective, so let me ask you this. Do you believe transparency plays a role in earning trust? For example, being open about your personal life or business dealings. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Trevor hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding. Absolutely. Transparency is important, but at the same time, everyone deserves a degree of privacy. There's a balance, right? Karoline leaned forward slightly, her gaze locking onto Trevor's. Of course, privacy is essential. However, when someone's actions potentially impact others, especially on a large scale, shouldn't we expect full disclosure? Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He wasn't sure where this line of questioning was headed, but he didn't like it. Still, he maintained his composure. I suppose it depends on the situation. Every case is different. True, Karoline said, her tone softening ever so slightly. But what about situations where someone might benefit financially or politically from keeping certain details hidden? Would that change your opinion on transparency? The studio grew eerily quiet. Even the background noise of the bustling newsroom seemed to fade away. Trevor forced a laugh, trying to brush off the tension. You're really putting me on the spot here, Karoline. Are we talking about me specifically, or is this hypothetical? Karoline smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. Let's stick to facts for now. Trevor, are you aware of any allegations regarding undisclosed financial transactions tied to your name? Trevor froze. His hands tightened around the edges of his desk, though he tried to keep his outward demeanor relaxed. Allegations? I'm not sure what you're referring to. Sounds like gossip to me. It's more than gossip, Karoline countered smoothly. According to documents obtained by my team, you've transferred significant sums of money to offshore accounts over the past few years. Can you explain why? Trevor's jaw clenched, and for the first time cracks began to show in his polished facade. I'm sorry, but I don't appreciate these accusations. If you have evidence, feel free to present it. Otherwise, I'd rather move on to a different topic. Oh, I plan to, Karoline said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a folder and placed it on the desk between them. These are copies of bank statements, emails, and other records linking you to those transactions. They also suggest connections to a highly classified tech project. Care to comment? The color drained from Trevor's face. He stared at the folder, unable to speak. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the studio lights overhead. Millions of viewers watched in stunned silence as the charismatic anchor they trusted suddenly looked like a man caught in the act. I need a break, Trevor stammered, rising abruptly from his chair. Without another word, he turned and walked off the set, leaving Karoline sitting alone under the glare of the cameras. The screen cut to commercial, but the damage was done. Social media erupted instantly, flooded with reactions from viewers who couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. As Trevor disappeared behind the scenes, Karoline remained seated, her expression calm yet resolute. She knew this was only the beginning. Months had passed since the scandal first broke, and the world was still reeling from its aftermath. The revelations about Project Genesis had sparked a global conversation about the role of technology in society. Governments convened emergency hearings to examine the ethical implications of AI, while tech companies scrambled to distance themselves from Nexus Technologies. The company itself became a pariah, its offices raided by federal agents and its executives facing charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy. Yet for all the chaos it caused, the scandal also ignited a movement, a push for greater transparency and accountability in an age of rapid technological advancement. Karoline stood at the center of it all, her name now synonymous with courage and integrity. She had spent countless hours testifying before Congress, explaining the dangers of unchecked AI and advocating for stricter regulations. Her exposé on Project Genesis had not only exposed corruption, but also served as a wake-up call for millions who had blindly trusted the systems governing their lives. Social media platforms were forced to overhaul their algorithms, and lawmakers introduced sweeping reforms aimed at protecting user privacy. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start, and Karoline knew that progress often began with small steps. One crisp autumn morning, Karoline found herself standing atop a hill overlooking Chicago. The city stretched out before her, its skyline shimmering under the golden sunlight. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself, feeling the cool breeze brush against her cheeks. It was a rare moment of peace amidst the whirlwind of the past few months. Alex joined her shortly after, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've earned this view," he said, handing her one of the cups. Take a minute to enjoy it." Karoline smiled faintly, taking a sip of the warm drink. "It's hard to believe how much has changed since we started this. Sometimes I wonder if we did enough." Alex chuckled softly. "Are you kidding? You've done more than enough. People are talking about AI ethics in ways they never did before. That's because of you." "It's not just me," Karoline replied, shaking her head. "None of this would have happened without Rachel, Daniel, and everyone else who risked everything to speak up. They're the real heroes." Alex nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "Still, don't downplay what you've accomplished. You didn't just expose a scandal. You inspired people to care about something bigger than themselves." Karoline fell silent, gazing out at the city below. She thought about all the late nights spent poring over documents, the endless phone calls with sources, the moments of doubt when she wondered if it was worth it. There had been times when fear threatened to overwhelm her, when the weight of responsibility felt too heavy to bear, but she had pushed through, driven by the belief that the truth mattered, that someone needed to shine a light into the darkness. As she reflected on the journey, her mind drifted back to Trevor. She hadn't heard much about him since his final interview, though rumors suggested he had moved to a small town in Oregon under a new identity. Some speculated he was trying to rebuild his life, while others claimed he was lying low until the storm passed. Either way, Karoline couldn't bring herself to feel sorry for him. He had made his choices, and those choices had consequences. What mattered now was ensuring that no one else could exploit technology the way he and Nexus had. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of Oregon, Trevor lived a life far removed from the glitz and glamour of his former career. His days were simple, working, odd jobs, tending to a modest garden, and avoiding anything that might draw attention to him. He rarely watched the news or scrolled through social media, unable to stomach the constant reminders of what he had lost. Yet even in solitude, the guilt lingered. He couldn't shake the memory of the faces, the colleagues he had betrayed, the viewers he had misled, the whistleblowers who had risked everything to expose the truth. Occasionally, Trevor wrote op-eds defending his actions, framing himself as a victim of circumstance rather than a perpetrator of wrongdoing. But few took him seriously anymore. The public had moved on, focusing instead on building safeguards against future abuses of power. For Trevor, there was no redemption, only regret. Back in Chicago, Karoline returned to work, determined to keep the momentum going. She launched a series of investigative reports exploring other areas where technology intersected with ethics, from facial recognition, software to autonomous weapons. Each story reignited the debate, reminding people that vigilance was key in safeguarding their freedoms. Alongside her reporting, she mentored young journalists, teaching them the importance of asking tough questions and following the trail wherever it led. Her efforts earned her numerous accolades, including prestigious awards recognizing her contributions to journalism. But for Karoline, the real reward lay in knowing she had made a difference. She often thought about the anonymous tip that had started it all, the envelope containing documents that had arrived on her desk late one night. Whoever had sent it had taken a tremendous risk, trusting her to do the right thing. And she had honored that trust, carrying the torch forward even when the path grew dark. On the anniversary of the scandal, Karoline attended a conference hosted by a coalition of tech watchdog groups. Speakers from around the world gathered to discuss lessons learned and strategies for preventing similar crises in the future. As she listened to their presentations, Karoline felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. When her turn came to speak, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by applause from the audience. Taking a deep breath, she began her address. "When I first started investigating Project Genesis, I didn't realize the scope of what I was uncovering. All I knew was that the truth mattered, and that someone needed to tell it. Today we stand at a crossroads. Technology has the power to transform our lives for the better, but it also carries risks we cannot ignore. Our job is to ensure that innovation serves humanity, not the other way around." The room erupted in cheers as Karoline concluded her speech. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled, marking the end of another day. But for Karoline, it was a beginning, a chance to continue fighting for a world where truth prevailed and justice was within reach. And so, with unwavering determination, she walked off the stage, ready to face whatever came next.